What if Geto had won? He had beaten Yuta and stolen Rika. What might have happened? Let's talk about it. All right, so shout out to Immortal for asking me about this today. And specifically, he says that Geto will capture Rika, but then, instead of enacting his plans immediately, he will also wait until he captures all of the disaster curses at their peaks. So, how would Jujutsu Society stand to survive an attack against this version of Geto? Okay, first of all, let me address the elephant or the honored one in the room, and that is that I don't think a Geto, even with Rika and the disaster curses, can hold a candle to Gojo. So I don't think Jujutsu Society would be doomed because ultimately Gojo would just step in and deal with Geto. However, that's not an entirely fair way to view this scenario. And that's because this entire thing stemmed from Jujutsu Kaisen 0, right? That is when Geto was trying to get Rika in order to enact his plans. And Jujutsu Kaisen 0 was written first in Jujutsu Kaisen, and it was meant to be a standalone one-shot. The story was never meant to continue after it. So for that reason, I don't think Gojo's strength had been fully, mapped out yet. I think the Gojo that existed in Jujutsu Kaisen 0 wasn't necessarily as strong as the one we would see him to go on and become. Now, he was still the honored one. He was still the Six Eyes Limitless user. Don't get me wrong. But at least in terms of the story, I do think the implication that if Geto had gotten Rika, then he might have been able to beat Gojo. But given everything we know now, I don't think that's possible. But let's still examine why it might have been back then. So for starters, we know the whole reason Geto wanted Rika is because he currently viewed his chances of success at just under 20% if Jujutsu Society got involved, aka if Gojo got involved, right? But he said if I had Rika, then my chance of success goes to over 99%. Like that's how strong he thought he could be with Rika. And let's not forget that this is vengeful cursed spirit Rika. It's not the kind of new Rika that Yuta would go on to get, as JJK continued. So this was the most powerful version of Rika. And not only that, even from JJK 0, we know that Gojo hypes Rika up, saying that hey, if she comes out again, I'll put my life on the line to try and stop her. When he tells Yuta, hey, don't let Rika out or else you and I are both going to die. And I don't think Gojo was necessarily being 100% serious there, but it just goes to show how much of a threat she is. Gojo will also go on to say that it's nearly impossible to exorcise a curse as strong as Rika, and really the only way to get rid of it is to unravel the curse like we saw Yuta ultimately do in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. So Gojo might not be able to kill Rika. Now again, this is hard to imagine. What's she going to do against that hollow purple, right? But let's just assume it's the case, that there are some level of curses that just are too powerful and they cannot be exorcised. Even still, what are they going to do to Gojo, right? Push come to shove, Rika nor the disaster curses nor Geto have a way past infinity. They can't really stop him. Now, we could snap our fingers and say that this version of Geto would have a domain expansion, so he would have a sure hit that would be able to get past infinity. Or we could say he has domain amp, but even if we give him domain amp, I don't think that's sufficient enough a threat, right? And even if we want to give him a domain expansion, are we going to say that it's more refined than Gojo's, right? So realistically, maybe he can't kill Rika, but they can't really stop him. But this isn't a stalemate, because while Gojo can't kill Rika, he can certainly kill Geto, right? And when that happens, Rika and all the other cursed spirits would be released into the wild and have their own agency returned. So the threat of Rika still would exist, but it wouldn't be weaponized and singularly pointed at Jujutsu Society in the same way that it was. So maybe she could just kind of be ignored at that point, countless other curses that are out there doing their thing all day, every day. Not the perfect solution, mind you, but this Geto, if he really did weaponize against society like this, and don't get me wrong, he would be immensely powerful. Gojo's the only one that's even arguably over him if he gets all of those things. He could destroy society if he was unimpeded, but Gojo would impede him, in my opinion, which, I think this would be the thing to push Gojo over the edge to finally confront his friend, much like it did in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, right? Gojo realized that he needed to be taken care of, and he wasn't even as big of a threat as we are saying he would hypothetically be here. Not to mention the fact that if he did kill Yuta, that alone would be enough to send Gojo over the edge and come and do something about this. So I know that the hypothetical was that he takes Rika and he's going to wait until he can get the disaster curses, Gojo would not give him that time, right? Like if he kills Yuta, Gojo is hunting down this man immediately, in my opinion. But again, even if we want to say 2 years pass, he gets all the disaster curses, I just don't see a way where he can actually beat Gojo. Gojo will kill him, and, he's not going to destroy society. And then also, Immortal did share a curse technique idea that he wanted my opinion on, and he says that this would be called stone formation, which is a construction-esque technique, but the user can only create formations and or weapons out of a diamond-like material. It can even harden parts of their body with it. For me, the primary use would be to harden the fists while fighting and legs when throwing kicks. However, each body part hardened does slow you down with the weight of it. Also, only hardening parts of the body as they're being attacked. And then you could also throw punches or kicks, which would create small, sharp shards that get launched at your opponent. There's many other offensive and defensive techniques I've thought of, but that's a lot, and I just wanted to summarize the basic uses. So I think this is cool. It instantly reminds me of Emma Frost and her diamond abilities. I think that's kind of one-to-one to what you're talking about, at least for the defensive properties. But then I really like the idea of being able to launch diamond shards at your opponents as projectiles. I think that's really cool. Now, as far as the potential of this, I mean, it certainly sounds really strong, right? Diamond being one of the hardest materials there is. You would basically be kind of like a heavenly restricted user, sort of on steroids, just in terms of your physicals being so good. So yeah, I think this is a cool technique. And then actually on the subject of if Rika had been captured, I got a few questions here from Zuriel, starting with, what if Kenjaku had captured Rika? But not only that, the disaster curses, the cockroach curse spirit, and finally, a vengeful curse spirit version of Gojo. That Kenjaku and all of those versus Sukuna. And this is interesting, right? Because for the same reason that I said that Geto couldn't stand against Gojo, I don't think that on paper that Kenjaku can stand against Sukuna no matter what curses we give him. However, the big question mark here is vengeful curse spirit Gojo. How strong is that thing? It really depends on, just what headcanon we want to say. It's still hard to think of any curse truly posing a threat against somebody on Gojo or Sukuna's level, but this is a curse based upon one of those people, right? So I would say that, again, depending on just how strong we want to make that vengeful curse, maybe they could get it done, but still it's hard to imagine Sukuna being defeated by them, but it just depends on how strong we want to say that thing is. Zuriel then said everyone in the Culling Games versus Sukuna, and Sukuna loses, right? Because Sukuna already lost versus not everyone in the Culling Games, So if we're assuming even some of the bad guys help the good guys, then it's just going to be even harder for him. However, if we're removing Gojo, which Zuriel didn't specify, but if we remove Gojo from the picture, but then we say everyone else in the Culling Games, Sukuna slams. Gojo has to be a part of the equation. So if he is, and we add more people, it just gets easier, right? But if he's not, then no amount of people can take him down. Then Zuriel said Kurorushi versus the disaster curses plus the grasshopper curse. So I'm not sure why we're throwing him in there as if he's going to make a difference. But I got to go with the disaster curses. Maybe I'm, underselling this guy. But honestly, I think probably Jogo or Mahito could beat him one-on-one. But you're going to give me all four of them plus the grasshopper for moral support, and I'm definitely going to go with them. And then finally, Zuriel said, any domain ideas for the hair couple, referring to the girl that can turn her hair into a jet and helicopter head up there. And I don't know, man. These techniques are so ridiculous that I feel like the only logical place we can go is that within their domains, they just fully transform into a jet plane and into a helicopter. Now, how is that useful? I don't know. I guess they can move around within their domain very quickly. I don't know. I mean, realistically, maybe they could fully transform their entire bodies into various parts. She kind of sped around by making her hair a jet. Maybe she could make her entire arm a jet and do really powerful punches. Maybe he could manifest helicopter blades all over his body or something. I don't know. Y'all let me know if you have any better ideas. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one, y'all. As always, thank you so much for watching.